Have you got skirting board or baseboard to fit in your home? Well, today on Fix It with Fowler, I'm going to take you through a comprehensive DIY guide to install skirting board and baseboard, including internal mitres, external mitres, how to join skirting board and how to fix it to your wall. So traditionally, as you enter a room, these mitres want to be facing away from you, and that way they're facing away from your eye line. And what that really means in this room is that this piece of skirting board that runs along this wall will have a mitre on the end going into that corner, and that piece there will have a straight cut. And then as we go along this wall, this piece of skirting board will have a mitre at the far end going into the back wall. That way, no matter which way you look, the mitre will face away from you and the joins will remain virtually invisible. And that's really important on pre-finished skirting board or if you've got a natural wood finish. The first piece of skirting board or baseboard we're going to install is across this back wall. Now this will not have any mitres on it and it'll be a straight cut at both ends. And the reason for that is if you try and mitre skirting boards into the corners, they tend to always open up and be visible. So to avoid that, this first piece will be straight cuts and we'll mitre the other piece into it. So once you've transferred your measurement onto your skirting board or baseboard, the next thing you need to do is cut it. Now you can see that this line runs down the skirting board, and when we come down with the blade actually wants to be the opposite side of this measurement because we want to keep this side here. So the blade will come down and sit there. Now if you go the other way, you're then going to lose a few mil of the cut because you're going to be the wrong side of the line. And now we can go and install it. Now you've got your skirting board or baseboard cut to the right length, you can now look at installing it onto the wall. Now these walls in this house, nearly all of the walls bar one, are solid brick or breeze block finished with a solid plaster. There's no plasterboard other than one wall over the other side of the bedroom. So I always like to use a two-stage method for fixing it, and that is some sort of adhesive and a mechanical fixing. Now I always use this Gripful. It's what I've used for years, but there's loads of alternatives. So you can pick something that you like in that sense. And now you can either use something like a nail, a masonry nail, or if it's on plasterboard, you can use something like a thin pin. And that just ensures that you can pull the top of this tight next to the wall, which means you don't have any gaps. Now, one thing to consider before you start drilling or hammering nails is anything like this. Now, over here, we've got this plug socket, and you can clearly see there's wires exposed down the bottom. But everywhere you've got a plug socket, a switch, or a radiator, be super careful because there's a chance you might have cables or pipes. So once you've identified them, you can now look at fixing it to the wall. So what I like to do, if like in this room you're going to have carpet, then I like to install these 5mm packers to lift the skirting board or baseboard off the floor. That means when you come to put the carpet in, you can tuck that nicely underneath and it gives a really good finish. You can now apply a thin bead of adhesive to the back of the skirting board. I now drill through the skirting board into the wall using a 7mm SDS bit. Countersink the hole. Insert a 7mm brown plug into the skirting board and tap into position. Using a 5x70mm screw, I now give it a couple of turns into the wall plug and then tap that through the skirting board into the wall. You can then tighten that up using a drill driver or an impact driver. Onto the first mitre. If you get your next piece of skirting board and slide up into the corner, now you can clearly see that there is a gap now between this skirting board and this one. So to avoid that, when you come to do your mitre, what you need to do is get an offcut of skirting board, put up so it's flat, draw down that, and now when you do your mitre, if you follow this line, this will marry up perfectly with this skirting board. The next thing to do on the top of the board is draw the angle that you're going to cut, the 45 degrees, and that way when you take it down to the saw, you'll have the perfect cut. Now you can follow that cut with your mitre saw set on a 45 degree angle. So now you've done your mitre in the correct direction to the corner, the next thing you need to do is remove all of this brown bit here. And what you need to do actually is cut that on a backwards cut. And what I mean by that, instead of cutting straight down, you need to cut slightly backwards. That way you'll get a real crisp edge between this and the existing skirting board or baseboard. Now you can use loads of different methods to cut this, a jigsaw or a coping saw, and I prefer a coping saw, especially if you've got something a little bit tricky. So to do that, all you need to do, make sure the blade is pointing towards the handle, and then start at one end, work your way along, and if you've got any tricky bits, you can then start from the other end and meet in the middle. Now you can check the skirting board lines up. And if you're happy with that, you can fix it into position exactly the same as we did before. On to joining skirting board then. So if your lengths are not long enough, you're going to need to join them, or if you're going round pipe work. So if you've got two flat cut ends and you butt them up together, what you're actually going to end up with is a joint like this. And no matter how hard you try, that will always show. Whether you fill it or paint it, it'll always come through. So the way to avoid that is to actually do a 22.5mm mitre on the end of the skirting board. And that way, when you come to put the next piece in and slide that up, it'll hide that really well. And again, working on the same principle away from the door with your mitres, when you cast your eye down this piece, you're not going to see this join. Also, when you fix these into place, that will pull nice and tight, and that gap will be almost invisible. The other thing you can use is this mitre mate, a real simple two-part system. All you need to do on one of these edges, put some of this glue. It's a bit like super glue. And then on the other piece, all you need to do is get this is an activator, spray it on like that, and then when they line up together, that will glue, and once it cures in a few seconds, that is it, finished. Have you subscribed to my channel? Well, if not, why not? It does not cost a thing. You're missing out on loads of great content. If I'm not making things like this, I'm fixing shed roofs, I'm mending doors, windows, doing plumbing or electrics. You name it, I've got it on my channel. So head over, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to leave this video a comment and a thumbs up, and that will help it reach loads of other people. On to external mitres then, and this is the final thing that you need to know. So I've put down some 5mm packers like I have the rest of the skirting board. Get your skirting board and push into place, and then you need to mark down the back of the skirting board. Now this mark runs down where the corner is going to be, and then while you've got the skirting board in place, if you draw a line, the 45 degree angle that you're going to need, and then we can move that to one side. Now we can repeat exactly the same process on this piece of skirting board. Again, put that into place, make sure it's pushed right up, and then draw down the back of that, and again make a mark on the front so you know which way to make your cut when we get to the saw. So before you go and cut these mitres on the saw, the first thing you need to do is check whether this corner is actually 90 degrees, and 9 times out of 10 it's not going to be. So what I use is one of these, a digital angle finder, really simple to use. You just turn that on, zero it, then you can open it up, put it around the corner, make sure it's pushing on both sides of the wall, and then you can lock that into position, and then that will give you the actual angle of the walls. So we've got 88.5 degrees. So what I'm going to do now is go down on the saw, set it to 44 degrees and cut these, and that will give us a perfect join on this corner. Now the skirting board is cut, you can then join this corner. Now I always like to use the good old mitre mate again. So it's the same, exactly the same principles as we did before. Put some of the glue on one side, and then get the activator, spray it on the other piece, and then you can literally just push these together. Now as they come together, you need to make sure you line this up, because once it sets you won't be able to move it. And there you have it, that is that corner finished. You can then just put some fixings in the skirting board like we have done, and that is all the skirting board installed. So hopefully you found this video useful and helpful. If you've got any questions, please leave me in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as you can. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon.